Welcome to the Light and Shadow podcast. I am Gray, quantum informed spiritual mentor, founder of the Ethereus Academy, and creator of the Alchemical Pattern-to-Healing Framework. I work at the threshold where insight alone stops working and real transformation begins. This is the space for the spiritually aware who are ready to go deeper than healing has taken them. I want you to try something before we begin. Take one breath. Not a performance breath. Not the breath you take when someone tells you to breathe and you do it self-consciously. Just one real, slow, deliberate inhale and a complete exhale. Notice what happened, even slightly. A small shift in the chest. A fractional loosening somewhere. A tiny drop in whatever was coiled before the breath. That shift, that small, immediate physiological change from a single breath, is your introduction to what we are exploring today. Your nervous system is the most powerful system in your body, and it is the one nobody taught you how to work with. We have been asking the wrong question for a very long time. When we feel unsafe, anxious, reactive, overwhelmed, shut down, disconnected, we ask, what do I need to feel safe? And we look outward. We look for the right relationship, the right circumstances, the right amount of money, the right validation, the right environment. Something external that will finally make us feel okay. But safety does not live in circumstances. It never has. Safety, the real, somatic, cellular, embodied experience of being okay, lives in the nervous system. And until the nervous system is regulated, no external condition will produce the felt sense of safety you have been searching for. So the question is not, what do I need to feel safe? The question is, what does my nervous system need to feel safe? So that shift from what do I need to what does my nervous system need is one of the most significant reorientations available in healing, because it stops locating the problem in your circumstances or your willpower or your mindset and starts locating it precisely where it lives, in the biological system that governs every thought you think, every choice you make, every relationship you navigate, every emotion you experience, and every spiritual experience you are or are not able to access. Today, we are going deep into nervous system regulation. What it is, what dysregulation actually looks like in your daily life, in your choices, your relationships, your thought patterns, your health. What the nervous system needs to come back to safety. How regulation and spiritual awakening are not separate paths, but the same one. And what becomes available in your life when your nervous system finally learns that it is safe to rest. This is the foundation everything else is built on. And most people have been building on sand. Before we talk about regulation, let's understand what we are actually working with. Because most people have a vague idea of the nervous system as something that causes stress, or when it is actually the master system of your entire human experience. Your nervous system is your body's communication network, the biological infrastructure through which your brain and body are in constant bidirectional conversation. It governs every voluntary and involuntary function in your body. Every heartbeat, every breath, every hormone release, every immune response, every thought, every emotional experience, every perception of the world around you. It is divided into two primary branches that are in constant dynamic relationship with each other. The sympathetic nervous system, often called the fight or flight system, is your activation branch. When it engages, your heart rate increases, your breath shortens, blood rushes to your muscles, stress hormones flood your system, your digestion slows, your immune function suppresses, and your perception narrows to focus on the threat. The system is designed for acute, time-limited activation. It is brilliant and necessary. It is what kept your ancestors alive. Second one is the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest or rest and restore system. is your recovery branch. When it engages, your heart rate slows, your breath deepens, digestion restores, immune function activates, cellular repair begins, and your perception opens to include nuance, connection, creativity, and possibility. The body is designed to move fluidly between these two states. Activation, when there is genuine threat, recovery, when the threat has passed. The cycle is natural, healthy, and necessary. The problem is not the sympathetic nervous system. The problem is a sympathetic nervous system that never gets to turn off. Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, one of the most significant advances in our understanding of the nervous system in decades, adds a crucial third state to this picture. Beyond fight or flight and beyond rest and digest, there is a third survival response, the dorsal vagal shutdown state. What most people experience as depression, dissociation, emotional numbness, collapse, freeze, and the profound disconnection from self and life that feels like existing but not living. This is the oldest survival response in the vertebrate nervous system, the physiological equivalent of playing dead when fighting or fleeing is no longer possible. So 3 states, 3 very different experiences of being alive, and the one you spend the most time in shapes everything. Your thoughts, your choices, your relationships, your health, your spiritual experience, your entire perception of what is possible for you. Now, chronic dysregulation, which is the nervous system stuck in sympathetic activation or dorsal shutdown, unable to return to the regulated state of genuine safety, is the epidemic beneath every other epidemic. It is beneath the anxiety epidemic, the depression epidemic, the chronic illness epidemic, the loneliness epidemic, the addiction epidemic, the relationship dysfunction epidemic. Because a dysregulated nervous system is not a nervous system that is simply uncomfortable. It is a nervous system that has learned through repeated experience, often beginning in childhood, that the world is not safe, that threats are constant, that relaxation is dangerous, that letting your guard down leads to being hurt. And once the nervous system has learned this, it filters everything through that lens. Every relationship, every opportunity, every moment of potential rest, every spiritual experience. The dysregulated nervous system is not perceiving reality. It is perceiving threat. And it is behaving accordingly, making choices, creating patterns, constructing a life organized entirely around the management of a danger that, in the present moment, may no longer exist. Now, what dysregulation looks like in your life? This is the section most people do not expect, because dysregulation doesn't always look like panic attacks and visible anxiety. Most of the time, it is invisible, woven so completely into daily life that it looks like personality, like preference, like just the way things are in your thought patterns. The dysregulated nervous system produces specific recognizable thought patterns, like catastrophizing. For example, the mind that automatically goes to the worst case scenario, that cannot hold good news without immediately scanning for what could go wrong. That turns a headache into a tumor and a quiet partner into an impending abandonment. This is nervous system running threat assessment around the clock. Second one, rumination. This is the thought loop that cannot stop. The conversation you had 3 days ago that you're still replaying. The mistake from last year that visits you at 3 a.m. The mind that cannot let go because the nervous system has flagged the experience as unresolved threat and keeps returning to it, looking for a resolution that the analytical mind alone cannot provide. Third, the black and white thinking. This is the inability to hold complexity. The person is all good or all bad. The situation is catastrophic or perfect. There is no middle ground. This is because nuance is a parasympathetic function. The capacity to hold complexity requires the expanded perception that only a regulated system can access. In sympathetic activation, the mind simplifies to survive. The fourth one is hypervigilance in thought. This is the mind that is always scanning, reading between the lines of every message, analyzing tone of voice, interpreting silence as rejection, looking for the thing that's about to go wrong. This is exhausting, and it is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system doing its job in an environment where its job is no longer necessary. The choices of a dysregulated nervous system are survival choices, not thriving choices. The relationship you stayed in too long because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. The opportunity you didn't take because the uncertainty of change felt like threat. The authentic expression you withheld because exposure felt like danger. The rest you couldn't take because stopping felt like falling. Dysregulation drives overfunctioning. The person who cannot stop, who fills every moment with doing, achieving, managing, producing, because stillness feels unbearable. Because if they stop, they will have to feel what they have been running from. So dysregulation drives underfunctioning. The person this in dorsal shutdown who cannot begin, cannot initiate, cannot mobilize energy toward their own life because the system has collapsed into a state of conservation that looks like laziness from the outside and feels like suffocation from the inside. Dysregulation drives reactive choosing. The text you sent in anger before you could think. The decision made from fear rather than values. The pattern of choosing the familiar, painful thing over the unfamiliar, potentially good thing, because the nervous system equates familiar with safe, even when familiar is destroying you. In your relationships is where this regulation becomes most visible and most costly. The nervous system does not distinguish between old threats and new people. It runs the same pattern with your current partner that it learned with your first caregiver. Because the nervous system learns through pattern recognition, and it will apply the old pattern until it is given compelling evidence that a new response is required. For example, anxious attachment. This is the dysregulated nervous system in relational pursuit mode, hypervigilant for signs of abandonment, seeking constant reassurance that never fully lands, interpreting normal relationship distance as imminent rejection. Unable to feel secure even when the partner is consistently present. Because security is not a thought, it is a nervous system state. And a nervous system that has never learned safety cannot feel it, regardless of what the other person provides. Now, for the avoidant attachment, the dysregulated nervous system in relational retreat mode. This is intimacy that triggers the threat response. Because in the past, closeness led to pain. So the system creates distance automatically, reads closeness as danger, and protects itself through emotional unavailability, while simultaneously feeling the loneliness that the protection creates. Now, the frown response, which is a dysregulated nervous system in relational appeasement mode, learned in environments where conflict was dangerous, where the only safe strategy was to manage others' emotional state and eliminate threat through accommodation. This is the person who cannot say no, who shapes themselves to whatever the room requires, who has no idea what they actually want because their entire system has been oriented toward managing others' states since childhood. A chronically dysregulated nervous system is not just uncomfortable, it is physiologically destructive. For example, chronic sympathetic activation is the body living in sustained fight or flight, produces elevated cortisol that suppresses immunity, disrupts sleep, creates inflammation, and over time damages every major organ system. Digestive dysfunction, as the body consistently redirects resources away from the digestion to its perceived threat response. Hormonal dysregulation, for example, as a stress hormone system overrides the reproductive and thyroid hormone systems. Sleep disruption, as the threat scanning system cannot fully disengage even in sleep. And the chronic muscle tension, headaches, jaw clenching, and shallow breathing that are the physical signature of a body that has forgotten how to rest. The spiritual cost is equally significant, and we'll come to that later. But first, let's talk about what the nervous system actually needs. Now, here is where the question changes everything. Not what do I need to feel safe, but what does my nervous system need? Because the nervous system has very specific biological somatic needs. It responds to specific inputs. It can be regulated, not through willpower, not through positive thinking, not through understanding alone, but through the deliberate, consistent provision of what it is actually designed to respond to. Your breath is the only autonomic function you can consciously control. And that access point, the ability to consciously alter your breath, is the direct lever to your nervous system that you carry with you at all times. The mechanism is precise. The exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system. A longer exhale, then inhale, is the physiological signal that the threat has passed and the body can return to safety. This is measurable activation of the vagus nervous through extended exhalation. The practice is inhale 4 counts, exhale for 8. This ratio, double exhale, is the most direct, immediate nervous system regulation tool available. The physiological sigh, which is a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth, is what the body does spontaneously to regulate after stress. And doing it deliberately produces the same effect within seconds. This is not a relaxation technique. This is a biological intervention, and it works every time because it is working with the nervous system's own architecture rather than trying to override it. One of the most important insights from the polyvagal theory is this. The nervous system is not designed to regulate alone. Human nervous systems evolved in community, in consistent co-regulation with other nervous systems. The sound of a calm voice, the presence of a regulated other person, eye contact with someone who is genuinely safe, touch from someone who is trustworthy. These are biological inputs that the nervous system requires. This is why isolation is so physiologically devastating. This is why loneliness produces measurable inflammatory effects. This is why the most healing environments are relational, because the nervous system is calibrated to use other regulated nervous systems as its primary reference point for safety. So healing does not happen in isolation. It happens in the presence of regulated others, whether that is a skilled practitioner, a genuinely safe friendship, a therapeutic relationship, an animal, or even time in nature, which the nervous system recognizes as a regulated environment. The animal you feel immediately calmer around, the friend whose voice drops your shoulders, the space in nature where your breathing spontaneously deepens. These are co-regulatory experiences, your nervous system finding its signal in another regulated system. One of the most damaging myths in healing is that transformation requires intensity, that you need to go deep, face everything, feel it all, push through. The nervous system does not heal through overwhelm. It heals through titration, which is the small, incremental, tolerable doses of the thing that was once intolerable. Small movements toward the edge of the window of tolerance, followed by return to the regulated center. The window of tolerance is the zone within which the nervous system can process experience without going into fight or flight or freeze. Healing expands the window slowly, carefully, with consistent support. The person who throws themselves repeatedly into overwhelming emotional experiences in the name of healing is not healing the nervous system. They are re traumatizing it. The path is incrementally wider, not heroically vast. If full vulnerability feels impossible, practice 10% more honesty in a safe relationship. If stillness triggers shutdown, practice 2 minutes of presence rather than an hour. If emotional expression feels overwhelming, begin with naming the emotion rather than embodying it fully. Each small step taken consistently expands the window. The dysregulated nervous system lives in the future or the past. It never fully arrives in the present because the present is where sensation lives, and sensation for a dysregulated system has become associated with threat. Somatic anchoring practices return the nervous system to the present moment through the body, the only place where the present moment actually exists. So there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. Find 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. This is not a mindfulness exercise, no. This is a sensory input practice that activates the parasympathetic through present moment sensory engagement. Also cold water exposure, like cold shower, ice on the wrists, cold water on the face, activates the dive reflex, which produces immediate parasympathetic response. The body interprets cold water immersion as a signal to slow the heart rate and conserve oxygen, directly interrupting the sympathetic activation cycle. Also, you have shaking and tremoring. This is the body's natural discharge mechanism for stored stress. Animals in the wild shake after a threat has passed. This discharges the stress hormone and resets the nervous system. Humans have been taught that trembling is weakness and to suppress it. The suppression is itself dysregulation. The practice of allowing, even deliberately inducing, shaking in the body is one of the fastest way to discharge stored sympathetic activation. Now, the vagus system, or the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the primary nerve of the parasympathetic system, connects the brain to every major organ and runs it through the throat. Vibrating the throat activates the vagus nerve directly. Humming, singing, toning, chanting. The ancient traditions knew this. Every healing tradition in history has used vocalization as medicine. It is vagal stimulation through vibration of the throat tissue. Even sighing, the long audible exhale with vocalization, is the body's spontaneous vagal activation response. Doing it deliberately is doing exactly what the body knows to do naturally. The nervous system evolved in nature. For the vast majority of human history, the environment the nervous system was calibrated to read as safe was the natural world. The sounds of birds, the sight of moving water, the feel of earth underfoot, the smell of green growing things. Now, the modern environment, which is artificial light, electronic sound, screen radiation, the concrete, disconnection from seasonal rhythm, is not a neutral environment for the nervous system. It is a novelty that the system has not evolved to process. And the chronic low grade activation that many people feel in urban environments is the nervous system's honest response to an environment it does not recognize as safe. Now, bare feet on earth, grounding or earthing, produces measurable reduction in cortisol. The negative ions in soil and grass have documented anxiolytic and anti inflammatory effects. Time near moving water synchronizes brainwave patterns to a regulated frequency. The fractal patterns in nature, the clouds, trees, rivers, produce measurable relaxation responses in the nervous system through a mechanism called fractal resonance. Nature is not a supplement to nervous system regulation. For many people, it is the most direct and immediately available primary medicine. The nervous system learns safety the same way it learned danger, through repetition, through pattern, through consistent evidence accumulated over time that the current environment is different from the one that required the defense. Safety signals are deliberate, consistent practices that tell the nervous system, through sensory experience, not cognitive reassurance, that the threat is no longer present. Morning sunlight in the eyes within 30 minutes of waking. This synchronizes the circadian rhythm, which is the foundation of nervous system regulation. A dysregulated circadian rhythm is a dysregulated nervous system. Now, consistent sleep and wake times. The nervous system is a pattern recognition system, and predictability is safety. When the body knows what to expect, it can release the vigilance of constant surveillance. Now, movement, particularly rhythmic bilateral movements like walking, swimming, or drumming, produces left-right brain integration and shifts the nervous system towards regulated states. This is why walking while processing a difficult emotion is often more effective than sitting still with it. Warm, nourishing food, eaten slowly and with presence. This is the act of eating is inherently parasympathetic when done without stress. It is a biological signal that the environment is safe enough to digest. Now let's go somewhere most nervous system conversations never reach, the spiritual dimension, because this is where the two threads of this episode weave into one. Every significant spiritual experience available to human beings, which is genuine meditation, mystical states, deep prayer, energy work, probably psychedelic assisted healing or shamanic journeying, kundalini activation, moments of genuine grace and divine contact, requires a regulated nervous system as its prerequisite. You cannot access expanded states of consciousness from a dysregulated baseline. When the sympathetic system is dominant, when the body is in threat mode, perception narrows. The bandwidth of consciousness contracts to the immediate, the material, the survival relevant. The capacity to perceive the subtle, which is the energetic, the intuitive, the quantum field of possibility that surrounds physical reality, is simply not accessible from that state. The mystics of every tradition describe their first task as the quieting of the mind and the stilling of the body. Not because physical stillness is spiritually superior, but because a regulated nervous system is the aperture through which expanded consciousness becomes accessible. The nervous system must be calm enough for the signal to come through. This is why meditation feels impossible for many dysregulated people, not because they are spiritually inadequate, no, but because sitting still in silence is the most challenging possible environment for a nervous system that has learned that stillness is dangerous. The hypervigilant system, when deprived of external stimulation, turns its surveillance inward. And the internal landscape it finds is not peaceful. It is the accumulated content of everything it has been running from. So regulation must precede deep meditation for many people, not replace it, but create the somatic foundation from which genuine stillness becomes possible rather than torturous. The chakra system, which is the ancient Vedic map of the body's energy centers, maps with remarkable precision into the nervous system's physiology. The root chakra, governing safety, survival, and grounding, corresponds to the dorsal vagal complex, which is the oldest part of the autonomic nervous system. When the root chakra is unbalanced, the dorsal system is dysregulated, producing the freeze, the collapse, the disconnection from life force that feels like depression and dissociation. The solar plexus chakra, governing personal power, will, and self-definition, corresponds to the sympathetic system, the mobilization energy of fight or flight. An overactive solar plexus, in energetic terms, is a chronically activated sympathetic system in physiological terms. The heart chakra, governing love, connection, and compassion, corresponds to the ventral vagus complex, which is the newest, most evolved branch of the parasympathetic system. This is the state of genuine social engagement, genuine connection, genuine openness to both giving and receiving. Nervous system regulation in polyvagal terms is the path to ventral vagal dominance. And ventral vagal dominance, in chakra terms, is an open heart. The two frameworks are describing the same destination from different directions. Now, one of the most common patterns in spiritual communities, and one of the most important to name, is the use of spiritual practice as a dysregulation management tool rather than a genuine healing path. So the person who uses meditation to suppress anxious thoughts rather than process their roots, the one who uses prayer to avoid feeling grief, the one who reframes every painful experience as a spiritual lesson so quickly that the experience itself never lands in the body, the one who lives in the spiritual dimensions because the physical and emotional dimensions are too overwhelming for an unregulated system to navigate. This is not spirituality. This is the most sophisticated form of dysregulation there is, one with a spiritual costume. Real spiritual development and nervous system regulation are not parallel tracks. They are the same track. The genuine spiritual path is one that takes the practitioner through the body, through the emotional body, through the full somatic experience of being alive in this particular nervous system, not above it, not around it, not in spite of it. You cannot transcend what you have not first inhabited. Now, one of the most significant results of nervous system regulation, and one that the spiritual community deeply recognizes even if it uses different language, is the restoration of intuitive access. Intuition is not a mystical gift available only to special people. It is the body's intelligence, the integrated processing of the enteric nervous system, the heart's electromagnetic field, and the body's somatic wisdom that produces knowing before thinking. It is the felt sense of rightness or wrongness that precedes conscious analysis. Now, this channel is available to every human being, but it requires a regulated nervous system to receive it. The dysregulated nervous system is too loud, too full of threat signals, too flooded with cortisol, too contradicted in its perception to receive the subtle signal of intuitive knowing. The anxious body cannot feel the quiet signal beneath the noise. The frozen body cannot feel anything at all. Regulation opens the receiver, and as the nervous system learns to rest, quiet wisdom that has always been present beneath the noise begins to become audible. Now, what spiritual traditions call inner guidance, divine knowing, or the voice of the higher self, physiologically, this is the intelligence of a regulated, coherent nervous system. Now, let's talk about the other side, because this is the invitation. Not just away from dysregulation, but toward what becomes possible when the system finally actually learns that it is safe. The regulated nervous system thinks differently, not because the content of your life has changed, but because the filter through which you perceive it has. Nuance returns. The black and white collapses into the full interpretations. People are complex. Your own experience is no longer sorted rapidly into threat and non-threat. It is held with the curiosity and spaciousness that only comes from a system that is not in survival mode. Now, rumination loses its grip. The thought loop that kept returning to unresolved threat, that kept replaying because the nervous system was still looking for safety, naturally quiets when the system has found it. Not because you forced the thoughts away, because the system no longer needs a surveillance. Now creativity opens. The regulated nervous system is the created nervous system. Innovation, imagination, playing, genuine problem solving. These are all parasympathetic functions. They require the expanded perception, the associative thinking, the comfort with uncertainty that only a safe nervous system can access. In your choices, from survival choices to values-based choices, the regulated person can ask, what do I actually want? What matters to me? What is true for me? And receive an answer that comes from genuine self-knowledge rather than from the threat avoidance calculus of a dysregulated system. The relationship you would have chosen, not the one that was familiar because it matched the nervous system's learned patterns, but the one that is genuinely good, genuinely reciprocal, genuinely safe. A regulated nervous system does not find healthy love boring. That is a dysregulated system's perception that safety is dull, that intensity is love, that the calm relationship has no charge because the charge was always the anxiety of insecure attachments. Regulation reveals that genuine safety is not bland. It is the ground from which real intimacy, real passion, and real love can grow. The risk you would have taken. The regulated system can distinguish between genuine threat and growth edge, between the danger worth avoiding and the discomfort worth moving through. The dysregulated system treats both as equally threatening. Regulation restores discernment. Now, every healing process in the body accelerates in the regulated state. For example, inflammation reduces, immune function restores, hormonal balance returns, sleep deepens, digestion normalizes. The cellular repair processes that require parasympathetic dominance, processes that cannot occur in chronic sympathetic activation, begin. The body was sick. From suppression begins to heal. When the suppression is released and the system returns to the state it was designed to spend the majority of its time in rest, repair, and restoration. Now, in your spiritual life, meditation becomes possible. Not the effortful suppression of thought that dysregulated meditation often is, but a genuine stillness, genuine presence, the actual experience of the space between thoughts that every contemplative tradition points towards. Synchronicity becomes perceptible. The meaningful coincidences, the aligned moments, the messages the universe has been sending, they were always there. Now, the dysregulated nervous system was too contracted in its perception to notice them. Regulation expands the aperture. And the spiritual experiences that have been described but perhaps never fully felt, like genuine mystical union, the dissolution of the sense of separate self, the direct experience of being held by something larger than the individual story. These states require a nervous system that has released the depth grip of survival and can, perhaps for the first time, afford to let go. Letting go is a parasympathetic function. You cannot surrender from sympathetic activation. You can only grip tighter. Regulation is the prerequisite for genuine surrender, and genuine surrender is a prerequisite for the deepest spiritual experiences available. So you have not been anxious because you are weak. You have not been reactive because you are broken. You have not been unable to feel safe because something is fundamentally wrong with you. You have been living with a nervous system that learned in environments that required it, that the world is not safe, that threats are constant, that relaxation is a luxury you cannot afford, that you must remain vigilant, controlled, defended, because dropping your guard is when the harm happens. That system saved you. At some point in your history, perhaps in your childhood, perhaps in a relationship, perhaps across lifetimes of accumulated learning, that dysregulation was the appropriate response to a genuinely unsafe environment. But the environment has changed, and the nervous system has not received the memo. The work of regulation is not the work of forcing yourself to feel safe. It is not positive thinking. It is not willpower. It is not deciding to be less anxious. It is the patient, consistent, compassionate provision of what the nervous system actually needs: breath, presence, co-regulation, movement, nature, safety signals, gradual expansion of the window of tolerance, until the system accumulates enough evidence to update its belief about the world, until it learns in its cells and its tissue and its oldest survival patterns that the threat has passed, that it is allowed to rest, that it is safe, finally, actually somatically safe, to let go. And when it does, when that shift happens, not as a thought, but as a body felt reality, everything changes. The thoughts that imprisoned you loosen. The choices that kept you small expand. The relationships that repeated the old wound become available for healing. The body that was sick from carrying what the mind refused to feel begins to restore. The spiritual experiences that were always available, but never quite accessible, begin to arrive. When it does, when that shift happens, not as a thought, but as a body felt reality, everything changes. The thoughts that imprisoned you loosen, the choices that kept you small expand, the relationships that repeated the old wound become available for healing, the body that was sick from carrying what the mind refused to feel begins to restore. The spiritual experiences that were always available but never quite accessible begin to arrive. And the question you have been asking your whole life, what do I need to feel safe, finally receives its real answer. Not a relationship, not a number in a bank account, not a circumstance or an outcome or an external validation. Your nervous system, regulated, resourced, finally at rest. That is the answer. And it has been available to you through your breath, through your body, through the earth beneath your feet, through the sound of your own voice, through the presence of genuine safety this entire time. Start there. Start now. One breath, the longest exhale you have taken all day. That is the beginning. If what we explore today is activating something in you, if you can feel in your own body the dysregulation we have begun describing, and you're ready to do the real work of regulation at the somatic, emotional, and spiritual level, this is the work of the Alchemical Pattern-to-Healing Framework. My private mentorship and session information is at the link in the show notes below. Until next time.